You wake up in a world where right now on this planet there are over 4 billion cows, chickens, pigs, and sheep alive, raised for one purpose, to be eaten. Now think back to the last time you saw lion steak on a menu, or wolf, or eagle. Never, right? Both are just meat. Familiar to you, flesh, protein, calories, cultures that never made contact with each other, separated by oceans, centuries, languages, landed on the exact same rule, completely independently. Don't eat predator meat. But why? The answer runs through the math of energy, the chemistry of poison, the texture of the meat itself, and almost every religion humanity ever invented. Let's break it down. Start with the math, because the math carries real weight. In 1942, ecologist Raymond Lindemann published research at the University of Minnesota describing what's now called the 10% rule. At every step up the food chain, about 90% of the energy gets lost, burned off as heat, movement, digestion. Only around 10% makes it to the next link. Grass converts sunlight into energy at about 10% efficiency. A cow that eats that grass keeps about 10% of that. A person who eats the cow keeps 10% of that. Now put a predator at the top of that chain. To raise 1 kilogram of wolf, you need roughly 10 kilograms of deer. To raise those 10 kilograms of deer, you need around 100 kilograms of plants. A single lion, over its lifetime, is basically an absurd pyramid of grass and antelope and wasted calories, collapsed down into one body. That's not a metaphor, that's a fancier word: thermodynamics. A predator is the most expensive meat biology can possibly produce. You've never seen a lion farm, because a lion would have to be fed things that eat grass. 3 levels of loss stacked up before the animal is even edible. Herbivores sit one step above the sun. Predators sit 3 or 4 steps above it. Every time you choose what to eat without even thinking about it, you're acting like an economist. There's a second reason, and it's worse than just expensive. What happens to everything the prey ate right before it became prey itself? Toxins don't disappear when an animal eats them. They build up, a process called biomagnification. A plant absorbs a small trace of a pollutant. A rabbit eats 100 plants and concentrates that trace. A fox eats 40 rabbits over its lifetime and concentrates that trace 40 times over. By the time you reach the top of the chain, poison that was barely measurable in the grass has been stacked, layer after layer, into a single dose. In 1912, during the Australasian Antarctic expedition led by Douglas Mawson, expedition member Xavier Mertz started eating the livers of the sled dogs after the food supplies ran out. Husky liver, like polar bear liver, carries an extreme concentration of vitamin A because the animal itself sits high on a food chain that had been stockpiling that vitamin for generations. Mertz developed hypervitaminosis A. His skin peeled off in sheets, seizures set in, and within weeks he was dead. He didn't die of starvation. He died from a liver that had spent an entire animal's lifetime concentrating something that was never meant to stay concentrated: concentrated toxins. And here's the twist. It's not that predator meat is expensive and separately also happens to be dangerous. The exact same mechanism causes both at once. The same trophic pyramid that costs 100 kilograms of grass to produce one predator is the same pyramid that concentrates every toxin along the way into that same expensive body. The cost and the poison aren't two different problems. They're one problem, viewed from two angles. There's a third layer too, quieter than the first two. But it's there. Predator meat tends to be tougher, drier, and gamier because a predator lives under constant stress, burns through fat in an endless chase for food, and carries parasites and pathogens picked up from every sick or wounded animal it's ever eaten. You're not just eating a concentrated dose of chemicals, you're eating that animal's entire disease history compressed into one meal. Whoever's watching this has probably already thought, what about bear meat? What about the rare cases of starving hunters, or the documented cases of people eating lion in parts of Africa? Doesn't that break the rule? No, it proves it. Every case like that is an emergency exception, wrapped in extra preparation, careful cooking, and cultural warnings about which parts never to touch. The exception isn't predator meat is actually fine. The exception is when the cost-benefit math flips, because starving to death is worse than getting poisoned, people will eat it, carefully and only then. A rule that only bends under extremes is still a rule. If the math and the chemistry already explain everything, why did people write this into sacred texts too? Because biology alone usually doesn't survive 10,000 years. Culture has to carry it forward once nobody remembers the original reason anymore. The dietary laws in the biblical book of Leviticus explicitly ban eating birds of prey, naming hawks, eagles, and vultures by name as unclean. Across completely unconnected cultures on different continents, predators keep showing up not as food but as totems, sacred animals, or spiritual guardians, worshipped or feared but never served at the table. Nobody was measuring DDT levels in an eagle's blood. Which brings us to you. Tonight, when you eat chicken, beef, or fish without even thinking about it, that's not a random choice. You're the endpoint of a filter that's been running through all of human history. A filter first written in energy, then rewritten in chemistry, and finally copied into laws and sacred texts so nobody would have to work it out again from scratch, generation after generation. The higher up the chain, the more expensive and more poisonous it gets, and somewhere in the back of your mind, even without knowing the math, you already knew that. Biology said it first, chemistry said it again, and when culture said it a third time, in 100 unconnected languages, it stopped being superstition. It became memory. If you want to see how ancient humans hunted mammoths and actually won, check the video in the card above.